Well, something has happened just now. Somewhere a light bulb was broken. And you all may say that it's not really a problem because it is only a light bulb. And yes, of course, you're right, but only at first sight. Because when I forget about this broken light bulb, something will eventually hurt me. And that something is the shards. Invisible, small, tiny, little shards that are lying somewhere, just bring pain. I'm going to tell you a story that has 3 important lessons. And I do believe with all of my heart that if you learn these lessons, this will make your life happier. I'm 35 years old. My father, he's 85. When I was only 6, I realized that my relationship with my father are a bit strange. He doesn't play with me the way parents usually play with their kids. He does not become a part of my small and happy childhood world. Sometimes I came to visit my school friends, and I couldn't help but notice how they interact with their parents. And I could see the light shining from their eyes every time they met together. And at these moments I realized what I was missing. That may be sad. That really broke my heart. I felt rejected. I felt unwanted. I felt that my father doesn't love me since he behaves with me this way, because he's always thoughtful and he's always sad. Still, time passed. I went to school. And when I was at school, when I was like about 10 years old, we were learning about the Second World War. And we had a home task. We had to talk with our relatives who actually survived the Second World War and tell like their experience in class. So I started counting, and I realized that then when the Second World War started, my own father was only 4 years old. So I immediately came to my dad and I asked him, Dad, well, they gave me homework at school and I want to do this, so please tell me, well, what was it when it was the war? And my dad, actually, he looked at me with his sad and lonely eyes and he said, I was evacuated. And he left to do his work. But that wasn't enough for me. So I came to my mom and said, Mom, well, I have a homework to do because, well, I need to know about the Second World War and Dad doesn't tell me, so please, can you please tell me something about this? And my mother, she told me. When the war started, my grandfather, he was fighting at war. And my dad, who was only 4, and his mom, my grandma, they were evacuated in a small Russian town called Saratov. They lived in a school building, all together with other families, elders, women, and children. And that might sound very interesting, but sometimes, well, actually, they were sleeping on old mattresses, and sometimes they had to pick up the mattresses on which they were sleeping and stick it to the windows. I'm going to tell you now why they had to do this, and I hope that you will never have to do such things in your life. Actually, the small town of Saratov was struck by the air forces. So every time when the air forces started their attack, a loud and terrible sirena was on. And that was a signal to take the mattress and stick it to the window. Because the air fighters were noticing light coming out of the windows. Because they knew if there is light, there are people inside. And if there are people inside, they were needed to be killed. So my father, his mom, and all the people who shared with them this period of their life, were pretending to be dead as not to die. For the first several weeks, they obediently took off the mattresses and stuck it to the windows, and then put down, and then stuck again. And then they were running down to the basement to hide for the few weeks. And then they stopped doing this and never did this again. But not because the Serena wasn't shouting all over the town. Not because of that. Because sometimes you have to take risks to feel freedom than to live your life and be constantly afraid. And that is my first lesson. These words might sound really very, very easy, but to make them a part of your mind, you have to pay a very expensive price. But my father, well, he was just a kid. And, well, can you imagine what the kids are doing? The kids, they are playing. And my father, he was also playing. He was wandering around a ruined town, searching for leftovers, tin boxes he found in the buildings that were destructed. He collected these tin cans. He was sitting on the pavement, and he also tried to find small pieces of glass, colored, beautiful, the same shards. So he was collecting them and watching them as they were beautifully sparkling in the sun. And then he put them in tin boxes and carefully carried them home to dig them inside his mattress. Because these multicolored pieces of glass, these shards, these tin boxes, actually, they were the most beautiful things that he ever saw in his life. And that were the only toys that he had. And that was the only childhood that he had. So when I heard the story, I cried. And I failed my homework eventually because I could not share it at school. That was too painful. Well, still time passed. The war was over, and my father became an amazing person. He became a professor, a lecturer, a writer. He taught more than 1,000 students within 60 years of work. I'm proud of him. I respect him. And I love him very deeply. But still, my father and I are just shards that cannot be put together. And we cannot share those wonderful moments of this relationship between father and son. You cannot share what you don't have. And you cannot accept what you don't know anything about. And this is actually the second lesson. You see, Wikipedia has a number. About 50 million of people died during the Second World War. They are like light bulbs whose light has gone out forever and never gonna shine again. But what is much worse is the numbers you can't count. Is those people who still have shards in their hearts and live with them until now. We can never understand all the consequences of our mistakes, but we must learn how to deal with them. This is important for us. I have a daughter. She's 7 years old. And every time when she lets me to become a part of your small childhood world, my eyes shine like a million of light bulbs. What am I saying to you now is that war is not the numbers. It's the people who suffered during the war, like my father, and people who suffered after the war, like me. It's a terrific example of psychological trauma, which we try to live with. We try to forget about these shards in our hearts. But still, when we forget about them, not trying to deal with them, the war starts again. So what I want to ask you now is to look deep inside your heart and search for these small shards that cannot make you live happily, that cannot let you love, that cannot help you express your feelings. Search for them, find them, get them out, get rid of them, and live the happiest life you can, where the shining of your eyes will be brighter than a millions of light bulbs, and there will be never a place for war. This was supposed to be the end of my speech. I wrote it 2 months ago. And from the day that I was approved to have this TED Talk with you, I was feeling dishonest. Because what I really want is to inspire you to do something for you and for those who you really love. But my relationship with my father, well, we're still like shards. So about a week ago, I took all the courage I had, I took all the power I had, and I took all the vulnerability that I had, because that is what it takes: courage, power, vulnerability. We've been not contacting with my father for several years. We hadn't had any talks. We just haven't been saying a word to each other. But I took my phone out of my pocket and I wrote him a text message. So I wrote him, "Dad, I love you. Thank you for being for me in my life." And I added a red heart. And I pushed the send button, and I forgot about this because I knew that that was my decision, not his decision, to take the shards out of the heart. So I just did it without waiting for an answer. And I didn't even know if I'm going to have an answer at all. But a few seconds later, I had a reply. I just opened my phone, I opened the text messages, and that's what I read there. "Serge, I love you too. I know that you're facing many hardships in your life right now, and I wish you luck." And I immediately replied him. I said, "Thank you, Dad. That values so much to me." And sent another heart. And at that very moment, I thought that a huge shard that was bringing an enormous pain that I've been having for many, many years in my life disappeared like this. So if I could do this after 30 years, so everyone can do this. And you can do this. You can share these values of love and forgiveness, firstly with yourself.